Hello and welcome to this psychology student webinar, this one looking at linear social psychology tackling difficult year 13 questions. In this particular video we're going to start a series of 5 mini videos where we're going to look at 5 different sample assessment material questions that I think are particularly difficult and how we might model an answer to each of those, starting with this application 16 marker. So the question reads, 2 psychology students were discussing the topic social influence. I find it fascinating how some people are able to resist social influence, said Jack. It must be the result of having a confident personality. I disagree, replied Sarah. I think resisting social influence depends much more on the presence of others. Discuss 2 explanations of resistance to social influence, and as part of your discussion refer to the views expressed by Jack and Sarah in the conversation above. So an application 16 marker. The key to any question, especially essay questions, is the planning and the preparation of how you might tackle it. So if we think about this, we know it's to do with resistance to social influence and we've got to plan what we might put into it. So we know there's different factors, and the first factor that jumps out at me is the idea of locus of control, which is a dispositional factor linked to personality. And because Jack mentions this idea of confidence, the extract is hinting that maybe personality is one of the variables we should be talking about. Once we've outlined locus control, we then need to bring in some research support for it. So that's going to be our AO3 element coming in here. And I'm going to draw on a study by Spector, who used Rotter's locus control scale. And then the key, because this is an application question, rather than continue my evaluation, what I'm going to make sure I do at this stage is apply my answer back to Jack and say how that research supports Jack's view in terms of normative social influence. That's about half the answer. We then need to, of course, do Sarah's view. And for Sarah, I'm going to talk about the idea of social support and it being a situational aspect, because Sarah mentions that people are less likely to conform if they're in the presence of others. Okay. Again, I'm then going to bring in research support, and this is a slightly more straightforward one, so I might talk about variations of Ash's study that focus on that idea of social support. And then again, because it's an application essay, I'm going to focus on how I might apply this knowledge then back to Sarah. Very, very difficult question. Let's take the first half of that and show you what that looks like in each of the different segments. And if that's still confusing, we'll try and break it down in a slightly different way just so you walk away from this webinar comfortable with how you might structure that response. Okay. So if we take each part, we said the first part is defining our knowledge of locus of control. It's our AO1, the core knowledge. So you might have a small intro just to remind yourself and focus your answer. You might say there are 2 key explanations of resistance to social influence that relate to Jack and Sarah's conversation: social support and locus of control. Straight away, and I've put it in orange text deliberately, I'm applying the knowledge to Jack. So I might say that Jack suggests that a confident personality is the reason why people resist social influence, and therefore what he's putting forward is a dispositional explanation which might be linked to the idea of locus of control. At that point, I still haven't really said what locus of control is, so I'm now going to continue my knowledge by saying actually people with an internal locus of control believe they have control over their life and are less concerned with social approval. Individuals with an internal locus control are therefore more independent and find it easier to resist social influence. It could be inferred that a person with a confident personality, which is what Jack said, would be more likely to display an internal locus control and therefore resist social influence. See how many times I've referred back to the question and this idea of resisting social influence. So we've done our knowledge, and it looks a lot on screen, but actually it's not a lot of text, as I'll show you in a moment's time, okay? What I now need to do is bring in some research to support that idea, show where it's been backed up. So you could say there is research support, the idea that individuals with an internal locus control are less likely to conform. If you imagine this as a burger paragraph now, that's our point. We're going to bring in our evidence. Spector used Rotter's locus of control scale to determine whether locus of control is associated with conformity. From 157 students, Spector found that individuals with a high internal locus of control were less likely to conform than those with a high external locus of control. But interestingly, only in situations of normative social influence where people conform to be accepted. Spector also found there was no difference between 2 groups of people in terms of informational social influence. So quite a meaty sort of burger paragraph we're forming here. This suggests that normative social influence and the desire to fit in is more powerful than informational social influence, which is the desire to be right, when we consider locus control and personality factors. Remember what I said, we now need to apply this to Jack, because the key point of the question was with reference to Jack and Sarah's conversation. So what you might say here is these results suggest that Jack's view is partly correct, that an individual with a confident personality, who might have an internal locus control, is likely to resist social influence, in particular the pressure to conform, especially in terms of normative social influence. However, if we want to really show off at this stage, what we can say is the results also suggest that Jack's view is not necessarily correct in cases of informational social influence where a person conforms to be correct. Now, having delivered this webinar once already, I know that many students look at that and find this quite an intimidating way to approach an answer and see a lot of text on screen and panic. The key is not to panic, because actually if we break this down into techniques we're more familiar with, what you will soon see is that actually this answer isn't that scary whatsoever. Let's take that knowledge point and just put it at the top here and imagine it's the introduction to our essay. So we've said there's two different reasons why people can resist social influence: social support and locus of control. And then what we've really done is just defined locus of control and really linked it to Jack in that opening sentence. So that's our AO1, that's the knowledge part. If I now put this on the screen, what you'll see is that what followed that was actually just a traditional Berger paragraph, an evaluation paragraph, where we say there is research support for the idea of locus of control. There was research by Spector, who used Rotter's locus of control scale, and he found that people are more likely to conform in normative social influence cases if they've got an external locus of control in comparison to internal, but there was no difference in terms of informational, and this suggests that normative social influence is really powerful, or more powerful than informational social influence if we're taking into account locus of control. So we've just got that Berger paragraph there now. So already this answer's looking a bit more manageable. The final stage was then to apply it to Jack and say, as we've said already, these results support Jack's view in that people with a confident personality are more likely to resist social influence. And that's it if we keep it briefer in that sense. Hopefully by showing you that structure, you'll see the answer doesn't look so intimidating. And what I'll do at the end of this webinar is put all of the answer on the screen, so that if you think it looks intimidating, still, hopefully when you see it all on one page, you'll realise that actually it isn't a bad answer at all. Let's do exactly the same now for Sarah and the idea of social support and situational factors. Here you might say Sarah, on the other hand, puts forward a situational explanation, and she suggests that resistance is based on the presence of others, which is linked to the idea of social support. People are more likely to resist social influence if they have an ally. So in the black text now, I'm going into the knowledge. Someone else who supports their point of view. Having an ally can help an individual to build confidence and remain independent because it breaks the unanimity of a group and suggests that another point of view is possible. Okay, so a slightly shorter piece of knowledge there, but still effective, and we've got loads of key terminology in there. We then bring in research, and this is more familiar territory now. It's research by Ash. So again, taking the Berger paragraph, would say there's evidence to support the idea of social support. In one of Ash's variations, one of the Confederates was instructed to give the correct answer. In this variation, the rate of conformity dropped to 5%, and this demonstrates that if the real participant has support for their belief, then they're more likely to resist the pressure to conform. And again, resist the pressure to conform is in there. That was the key term from the question itself. We then need to apply it to Sarah, and again, this suggests that Sarah's view that the resistance to social influence depends much more on the presence of others is supported by research, as Ash demonstrates that social support, another participant giving the correct answer, lowers the pressure of the group, making it easier to demonstrate independent behaviour. As I've said, what I'm going to place on the screen now is that entire answer, and those of you that have subscribed to the webinar will get a copy of this in your MyTutor2You account. What you can see on the screen is the entire answer. It's approximately 500 words. You'd need no more than this at all. The black text is our knowledge, the green text is our application, and the blue text is our evaluation. And when you see it like this, it becomes a bit more manageable, because what you realise you're doing is you're presenting your knowledge, bringing in the research to support that knowledge, and then you're linking it back to either Sarah or Jack. Okay? Hopefully you found that useful. We're going to tackle 4 more questions in the next 4 videos and another one of these tricky application essays. So if you found this useful, please do watch the others, and hopefully you'll pick up some key points along the way. Thanks for watching again, and goodbye for now.